We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Gimel Lamed Aleph and Meseches Bava Metzia. This is Bava Metzia Daf 33a. The Gemara is bringing a brisa to prove whether Tzar Bali Chaim is Doraisa or D'Rabbanan. The brisa says Rovates. The pasuk says that the animal is crouching beneath its burden velo Ravtzon. That means to say that it happened this one time, but it doesn't happen regularly. Rovates velo Omen. It's crouching beneath the burden, not standing there. Tachas Maso velo Mefurak. Tachas Maso means under the burden, and not that it's unloaded, meaning you have to unload the animal. You don't have to load up an animal that's already unloaded. And tachas maso, again under its burden, maso sheyachol la'amod bo. We're talking about a burden that it is able to withstand. And so the Gemara says, "V'yamrit tzar bali chaim doraisa." Now, if you say that tzar bali chaim is doraisa, mali rovetz, umali ravtzon, umali omid, what difference does it make if it's crouching, if it happens regularly, if it's standing? What difference does that make? And the Gemara says, you're right, but hamani Rabbi Yossi Aglili. We'll just say that this brisa follows the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Aglili. We already noted, Damar tzar bali chaim d'Rabbanan. Rabbi Yossi Aglili happens to say again that tzar bali chaim is d'Rabbanan. This would not be a proof in terms of what the Rabbanan hold. And the Gemara continues, Hachanam mistabra, makes sense to say like that. The Katani tachas maso, because it says underneath its burden, maso sheyachol amud bo. It says it has to be a burden that the animal is able to withstand. Now, man shamadle dislei haisfar. Who's the Tana that held of this idea, of this reasoning? Rabbi Yossi Aglili. That was Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Shma mina. So the Gemara says, indeed, you see that this brayso is Rabbi Yossi Aglili. And Rashi explains, Rovetz mikrahulo means it just happened to be this time. Sherovetz tachas maso, that it's crouching beneath its burden. Bepam azos, it just happened this time. Velo ravtzon haragel bekach, it's not something that's regular. Velo mefurak, and it's not unloaded. V'hutzarach te'ina, and requires to be loaded. Well, the kamon parach. Now the Gemara later will ask, haksiv hakem takim. Doesn't the pasuk say you do have to load an animal? Why is this brisa implying otherwise? But the Gemara continues, Can we really say that this brisa follows Rabbi Yossi Aglili? But it says at the end of the brisa, Tachas maso v'lo mefurak. It says under its burden and not unloaded, meaning the brisa seems to be saying there's no mitzvah to load the animal. Now, my lo mefurak, what does it mean it's not unloaded? Ilema lo mefurak klal. If you're going to say it means it's not unloaded at all, meaning there's no mitzvah whatsoever to load the animal, haksiv, that's not true. It's written in the pasuk, hakem takim imo. It says you do have to load the animal. You have to help out the owner of the animal. Rather, it's obvious. Lo mefurak bechinam. What it means is that in a situation of lo mefurak, you don't have to do it for free. Ela b'schar, but you can take wages. You can be paid for helping to load the animal. And man shamadle dislei haisvar. Now, who's the one that holds of that? That was the Rabbanan. We already identified that that's the sheet of the Rabbanan. Now we're saying it's Rabbi Yossi Aglili, and the Gemara says it's not a problem at all. Liolam Rabbi Yossi Aglili. He really, this brisa is Rabbi Yossi Aglili, and you can always say uvitina that when it comes to loading, savar la Rabbanan. Rabbi Yossi Aglili agrees with this position of the Rabbanan. And the Gemara continues. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Kisira, it says when you see the animal that it needs assistance, you have to help out. Yachol afilu meirachok. I might think that's even if you see it from a distance. Talmud lomar kisifka, the pasuk says when you encounter, that sounds like you're close up. I kisifka yachol pegia mamish. If it said kisifka, I might think you have to actually be right immediately close up. Talmud lomar kisira, the pasuk says kisira, that you're seeing it from some distance. Ve'ezu hi re'iyah sheyesh ba pegia. So what's considered seeing it, but it's also considered an encounter? Shiaru chachamim, the chacham evaluate that you are the following distance away. Echad mishava umechsa b'mil, 1/7.5 of a meal. We would call that 2/15 of a meal. V'zehu ris, and that is the amount that we call a ris. Tana was taught to mod da imo ad parsa. He has to accompany the animal for a parsa after he helps. Amar Rabba bar bar Chana v'not el schar. Rabba bar bar Chana says that for accompanying the animal, he is allowed to take wages. And Rashi explains, Modada imo la'achar sheitino, meaning after you load up the animal, you got to walk with it a little, Shema yachzor v'yipol, to make sure that it doesn't fall again. And Tosas explains slightly differently, V'not el schar, he can take wages by mesha modada because he's accompanying the animal. Uveprika mayri, Tosas understand that we're talking not about loading the animal, but unloading the animal. Sheyare pen yerbutz, because there's a concern, maybe the animal will collapse. The ibetiina, and Tosas say, if we're talking about loading the animal, so pshita, so it's obvious that you get paid. Da'atiina guva b'schar, even the loading you get paid for. Certainly if you're accompanying the animal, you're going to get paid for that as well. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Avedaso v'avedas aviv, his lost object, and his father also has a lost object. Avedaso kodemis, his lost object comes first. Avedaso v'avedas rabo, his lost object, and his Rebbe's lost object, shalo kodem, his comes first. Avedas aviv v'avedas rabo, his father's lost object, and his Rebbe's lost object, shal rabo kodemis, his Rebbe comes first. Shal aviv heviu olam hazeh, because his father brought him to this world. V'rabo shalimdo chachma, but his Rebbe who teaches him wisdom, mevio l'chayu olam haba, brings him to olam haba. V'im aviv chacham, and if his father is a chacham, shall aviv kodem, as his father comes first. Haya aviv v'rabo nosen maso, if his father and his rebbe are carrying burdens, meiniach es shal rabo, first he places down his rebbe's, v'achakach meiniach es shal aviv, and then afterwards he places down his father's. Haya aviv v'rabo beis hashevi, if his father and his rebbe are captives, podes rabo, he redeems his rebbe, v'achakach podes aviv, and after that he redeems his father. V'im aviv chacham, but if his father is a chacham, podes aviv v'achakach podes rabo, he redeems his father, and then he redeems his rebbe. And the Gemara says, Minahani Mili, from where do we know this, that a person's own belongings come first? Amar Rav Yehuda Marav. Rav Yehuda says, the Rav says, Amar Kra, the Pasuk says, Efes ki lo yebecha evyon, there won't be poor among you, shelcha kodem l'shel kol adam. It means yours comes before others. You shouldn't bring yourself to be poor. V'amar Rav Yehuda, and Rav Yehuda says, Amar Rav, that Rav says, Kol ha'mekayim ba'atzmo kach, anybody who actually fulfills this with himself, sof bali dekach, in the end, will come to this. And Rashi explains, Minahani mili d'shelo kodem, how do we know that his comes first? Lo yeh b'cha evyon, he's zoyer min aniyas. The pasuk is saying, be careful not to bring yourself to poverty. But then we said, Kol ha'mekayim ba'atzmo kach, anyone who does this, what it means is as follows. Aval b'shelo hitilu olav ha'kosav, even though the pasuk doesn't say that you have to help the other person and forego your own belongings, but yesh lo adam likanes lifnim mishuras adin, a person really should go beyond the letter of the law. V'lo ledaktek shali kodem, he shouldn't be so medaktek that my stuff always comes first. Im lo behefzer mochiach, unless it's a real clear loss of money, then already he can say that his stuff comes first. V'im tamin medaktek, if a person is always so careful that his stuff comes first, poreg me'olav ol gemilas chasadim u'tzedakah, he's essentially throwing off of himself the yoke of doing chesed and giving tzedakah, v'sov sheitzdarech lebrios, and in the end, he's going to need other people to help him. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Haya aviv v'rabo nosen masui v'chulu, if his father or his Rebbe were carrying a burden, again we said that his Rebbe comes first because his Rebbe brings him to Olam Haba. And the Gemara says, Tanu Rabban, and the rabbis taught, Rabo Sha'amru, the Rebbe that we're talking about, Rabo Shalim de Chachma. It's his Rebbe that teaches him wisdom. V'lo Rabo Shalim de Mikro Mishnah. We're not talking about the Rebbe that just teaches Psukim and Mishnayis. Divrei Rabbi Meir, that's the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says, Kol Sharov Chachmaso Heimen, whoever he got the majority of his wisdom from. Rabbi Yossi says, Afila lo heir einav ela b'mishnah achas, even if he only illuminated his eyes in one Mishnah, Zehu Rabo, this is considered to be his Rebbe. Amar Rava says, Kagon Rav Sechora, it's like Rav Sechora, Ta'asavron Zua Malistron. He explained to me what Zua Malistron is, meaning to say again, he explained to me just one idea. And the Gemara continues, Shmuel Karamane Aleh Hume Rabbanan Da'asavre Echad Yored Lamas Hashechi Ve'echad Poseach Kiven. Shmuel tore his clothing over one of the Rabbanan who explained to him, this is a Mishnah that refers to the Kohen would stick his hand through the hole in the door up to his armpit, and in that way he would open the lock from the inside. And then there was also one lock that was Poseach Kiven that was directly opened with a key. So again, this is one of the Rabbanan explained this Mishnah, and therefore Shmuel considered him to be his Rebbe. Amar Ula says, Talmidei Chacham shebeBavel, the Talmidei Chacham in Bavel, Omdin Zem ibnei Zeh, they stand from one another, V'korin Zalzen, they tear their clothing from one another. The idea is that they would learn with their peers, so they all considered each other to be their own Rebbeim. Ulinyan Avedim, when it comes to Aveda, when it comes to lost object, b'makam aviv einan chozron el Rabo muvak. Then we say that you only go and take care of the Rebbes instead of the fathers if you're talking about a Rebbe muvak. It wouldn't count if he just taught you one Mishnah, etc. That's not enough to say that you forego your fathers and take care of your Rebbes unless it is your Rebbe muvak, your true Rebbe. And Rashi explains, Shalimdu Chachma, that taught him wisdom. What that means is Svaras, Taimei HaMishnah, means the reasoning behind the Mishnayis. Ulavin Shalo Yisosar Zuazu, to understand why they don't contradict one another. V'tamei Isser V'heter V'achiv V'aptor V'hu Nikra Gemara, the reasons of Isser, Heter, Chiv, and Ptor, that's what's called Gemara. Mikra is Torah, Navim, Uchsuvim, that's Tanakh. Mishnah, Kamoshe, Shnuyos, Vein Time, and Mefurish Ben, that just means learning Mishnayis without the reasons. Kol Sharov Chachmaso Heimenu, anyone who the majority of his wisdom is from him, Im Mikra, Im Mishnah, Im Gemara. That would mean whether it's Mikra, Mishnah, or Gemara. Heyer Einav Shodio Tam Mishnah Achas Shalo Yachol Havin. Even somebody who taught him just one Mishnah that he didn't understand, the Gemara then said that Asavron Zua Malistron, he explained the concept of Zua Malistron, that's Beseder Taharos, that's in Seder Taharos, Meseches Kalim, Hishnuya, that's where it's taught. V'lo Hayisi Yodea Maklihu, I didn't know what this vessel is, this Zua Malistron. V'lamdeini Shehu Kaf Gedola Shemesalken Bozom HaKadera V'Kalachas Litzdadin, I learned that it's some kind of a big spoon. Karamane, he tore his clothing clothing kerash ein mesachik kedin Talmud al Rav. It means he tore his clothing in the same fashion that a student tears for his Rebbe, and he taught him just this mission of echad yored la masashechi, that again is opening the door by sticking your arm through the hole all the way to the armpit. Mishnah hiba Meseches Tamid. This is a Mishnah Meseches Tamid. Eitzel hanechnasim shachros liftoach telosas ha'echol. It's talking about people who would enter in the morning to open up the doors of the Beis Hamikdash. Misha zacha b'dishim zbeich hapnimi v'chulu u'shnei maftechos biyado echad yor la'amas hashechi v'echad poseach kivin. So the Mishnah says he had two keys. One of them was la'amas hashechi, and one was opened directly, and it explains it as follows. Echad min ha'maftechos halol poseach pishpish hatzvoni sheitzel pesach ha'echol. One of the keys opened up the small northern door by the entrance of the hechol b'kar mizrach etzvoni shel ulam, the northeast side. V'hechol kedetnan hasam shnei pishpishim hayu lo l'shar ha'gadol echad etzafon ha'echol v'ulam v'echad l'droma v'osa shebedarm lo nichnas bo adam me'olam. The one in the south people never entered, as opposed to the one in the north. Kenem afarish hasam is explained over there. V'oso pishpish shebetzafon v'ulepesach shebezavis ha'ulam etzel chamish amos shel kosel ha'echol shebetzafon pesach ha'echol v'delas so v'vespo v'oso mafteach shelosa ha'pesach yored lamas hashechi. The point is that particular door, so he had to stick his arm down all the way to the armpit. Pishpishim psachim katanim. A pishpish is like a small door. Kamin kipos katanos archakove rochav hakosel v'delas so v'vespo echad yored lamas hashechi means habol liftoach bo shachars, the person opening the door in the morning. Pishpish v'zavas ulam omin mi bachutz besocha ulam. He would stand on the outside. Umachnes yodo bechor shebekosel. He would put his hand into the hole in the wall. Ad beis shechev all the way up to his armpit. Uposech, and that's how he would unlock that door. V'echad posech kiven, and then one of them was unlocked directly. La'achar shenichnas b'zeh, meaning after he entered this door, ubolo l'to asher al pnei achas esreyama shel ulam uksas min ha'echel uposech b'mafteach sheni. He had a second key that he used on another door. Shemin hasel lahechel mehar below torach kishar psachim. There was no bother. It was easy to open. You opened it directly with the key. V'nichnas lahechel liftoach telosas hechel. He would then enter the hechel in order to open the doors of the hechel. Kiven means kimo yasenim b'tfus v'ikvenek kiven maher below torach. It just means he did it directly, quickly. There was no burden to it. V'hai shar hagadol hu pesach hechel shevein ulam lahechel. This big gate was the entrance of the hechel between the ulam and the hechel. So in any case, he explained this particular Mishnah, and that, so to speak, made the person his Rebbe. And Rashi continues, Omdin zem ipnei zeh, they stand for one another, kedin Talmud l'Rav, they stand for one another like a student stands for a Rebbe. Lefisho yoshvin Talmud b'beis hamedrash. The idea is that they were sitting all the time, Talmud b'beis hamedrash yachad, they were always together in the beis medrash. Umakshin and mefarkin, and they would ask each other and answer, v'chulam l'meidim zeh mizeh. The point is, they would all learn from one another, so they all considered each other their Rebbeim. But then we said, in terms of foregoing the fathers and instead taking care of the Rebbe's Aveda, etc., that's only l'Rabbo Muvak, that's only for his total Rebbe, so to speak, his real Rebbe, Sharov Chachmaso Mimenu, meaning that he gets most of the wisdom from him, Kereb Yehuda, as Reb Yehuda says. And the Gemara continues, Kaboy minei Rav Chisda me Rav Huna. Rav Chisda asked Rav Huna the following question: Talmud v'tzarach lo Rabbo mai. What if you have a student, but the Rebbe needs the student? What would be the halacha in such a situation? Amar le, he said to him, meaning Rav Huna said to Rav Chisda, lo tzrichna la Chisda, I don't need you. Rav Huna took it as an insult, as if Rav Chisda was saying that Rav Huna needed him. Ad tzrich li ad arbon shnin, you need me for 40 years. Ikbedi hadadi, the Gemara says they were angry at each other. V'lo ayli legabe hadadi, they didn't visit each other. Yasef Rav Chisda arbon tanisa mishum dechalash daite de Rav Huna. Rav Chisda sat 40 fasts because he felt that he had caused Rav Huna to feel bad, as though he'd been insulted. And Yasef Rav Huna arboin tanis, and Rav Huna also sat 40 fasts mishum dechash de Rav Chisda, because he had suspected Rav Chisda. Itmar was stated, Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef Amar, Rav Yochanan, Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef says that Rav Yochanan says, halacha Rav Yehuda, the halacha is like Rav Yehuda, that the Rebbe that we're talking about is Rov Chachmaso, the one that taught most of his wisdom. Rav Acha bar Rav Huna Amar Rav Sheshas, Rav Acha bar Rav Huna says that Rav Sheshas says, halacha Rav Yossi, the halacha is like Rav Yossi, that the Rebbe is even somebody who illuminated one Mishnah. And the Gemara says, Umiyamar Rav Yochanan hachi, but does Rav Yochanan really say the halacha is like Rav Yehuda? V'amar Rav Yochanan halacha kestam Mishnah, but Rav Yochanan said the halacha is like the stam Mishnah, the unattributed Mishnah. Utnanim, we learned in the Mishnah, Rabbo shalimdo chachma, that it means the Rebbe who taught chachma, who taught wisdom. That's exactly what Rabbi Meir said. That's not the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda of Rov Chachmaso. The Gemara says, no, it could be Rabbi Yehuda, my chachma. What does the Mishnah mean when it says chachma? It could be that it means Rov Chachmaso. It could be that it means the majority of his wisdom. And the Gemara continues, Tana Rabban, and the rabbis taught, ha'oskin b'mikra, those who deal with psukim, who learn psukim, mida ve'ena mida. It's a good thing, but it's not the best thing. B'mishnah, if a person learns Mishnah, mida, that is a great thing, v'nodlanale'aschar, and you get reward for it. Gemara, and if you learn Gemara, ein lach mida gadol mizu, there's nothing greater than that. Uliolam have a ratz l'mishnah yosem in Gemara, but you should always run to Mishnayos more than Gemara. And the Gemara says, Hagufa Kashi, you just contradicted yourself. First you say that Gemara, there's nothing greater than Gemara. And then you say, you should run to Mishnah, it's more than Gemara. And the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, and Rashi explains, V'tzarech lo Rabbo, again, the Rebbe needs the Talmud, Sheshama Shmuas sheyesh biyadu mipi achera, meaning that he heard things that he has from other people. The Rebbe needs to find out those things. What's the halacha? Kalamar kodem lo aviv linyan aveda, meaning to say, is such a Rebbe before his father in terms of aveda, because now again the Rebbe needs the Talmud. Utznan, we learned in the Mishnah, Rabbo shalim do chachma. It said in the Mishnah that we're talking about a Rebbe who taught wisdom. Stomach Rabbi Meir, that seems like a stam Mishnah like Rabbi Meir, not like Rabbi Yehuda. And then the Gemara said, Rov chachma, so it really could mean most of the wisdom in Mikra, in Mishnah, whatever it is, the majority of wisdom either in Mikra, if in Mikra, if in Mishnayis. And then we said that learning Mikra's Midah Hiktsas is somewhat of a good Midah. Ve'ena Midah, but it's not the best. Shaha Mishnah Gemara Yafim Imana, because Mishnah and Gemara is greater than Psukim. Mimnei Shetzluyin Begirsu Mishtachim, because that you already have to learn over and over, otherwise it's forgotten. Should be a Mayim Loya Gemara Bechsav. Rashi says, because in those days they didn't write down the Gemara. V'gam Loya Nitan Lichasav, and it wasn't supposed to be written El Lefishin Ismatu Halavavas. The only reason it was written was because the hearts became smaller, so to speak. His Chilu Doros Acharam Lechasva. That's why the later generations began to write down the Gemara. And Rashi says Gemara Kvar Perashti. Lamala, I already explained what Gemara is above. Shula says Leiv Lahavin Stimus Tamei Mishnah. The idea is to understand what the reasons of the Mishnah are. Mahem Ucheshashtaim Sosro Zuesu. If you have a contradiction of two Mishnayos, Yavin Lataritz Shustein Kayamas. You figure out how to answer so that they both apply. Oladas Divrei Hatanaim Hachalukim Medavar. Or maybe you'll figure out that they go according to different Tanoim. V'nei Mohammadi Ploni Chachmu. You say who's the author of this Mishnah? It's so and so. In any case, that's the idea of Gemara, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Gimel Amid Beis.